Welcome to another episode of the GSP, the Good Sugar Podcast. Marcus, we have a really good guest today because he's on brand in a lot of ways, and also I think you and him are going to have a very spirited debate on all things related to mental health.
I think we're going to agree on 90% of the stuff, and I think he's going to drop some stuff in there about certain types of seafood that I'm probably going to debate just because, right. I got to be a prick sometimes, I
know he's big into endorsing a lot of bivalves and stuff, but very interesting dude, really smart guy. Let's just bring him on right away. All right, Marcus, so here he is right now. He's a psychiatrist, an author, also a farmer, assistant clinical professor of psychiatry at Columbia University College. It is Dr. Drew Ramsey. His latest book, Eat to Beat Depression and Anxiety. How are you, sir?
Doing very well, gentlemen. It's nice to see you both.
Nice to see you, too. You have a very professional-looking background. It's very clean. The lighting is good. I like what you're doing there.
And listen, if you look at his face on YouTube, if you guys come on, he's a great-looking guy. He's very clean-cut, looks healthy, bright. I mean, this is a guy that we should sit down and listen to.
Yeah, you emote health and wellness just on your basic energy.
Thank you. I've been working hard to craft that. They said it needed to be part of my brand as a physician to be, radiating health. So I'm working on it.
That's good. Well, mission accomplished. I'd say it's pretty good. So you also written a lot of other books that seem to all focus on diet related to mental health, if that's a good way, like whether it was the happiness diet, the 50 Shades of Kale, all these books seem to focus on how diet is linked to mental health, correct?
That's exactly right. We're calling this nutritional psychiatry. When I first started doing it, it didn't really have a name. And I was a young doctor in training, focused on mental health. And and in my personal life, I think like you, I'd made a lot of changes. I was a vegetarian back then. I exercised a lot. I really saw that as really linked to how I felt. But we didn't talk at all about that in terms of how we teach young doctors to be in clinical practice.
Amazing. What an oversight.
It seems that way. It just felt
what do you think is the causation of why that's so missing from the scientific community, other than academic snobbery? What do you think the psychology behind it is?
I think there are a couple of pieces of that. I think that because the way that mental health care functions, which is that we don't, it's something we all want to avoid. None of us want to admit or talk about the mental health problems in our families or with ourselves, that we wait until when we need a doctor, it's a crisis, right? When did you, I finally saw a psychiatrist. I finally went to therapy. And that kind of attitude about taking care of our most important organ, which is our brain, that's where mental health lives. I think it really puts us behind the eight ball that as a psychiatrist, I'm meeting you in crisis, right? You're suicidally depressed. So the idea that I'm going to talk to you about avocados, that's not like fancy medicine. And so I think it's a way that we really exalt, for some good reasons. I like pharmacology. I prescribe medicines all the time. I think it's amazing what's happening, but kind of exalt these types of solutions. And we don't in medicine and in general culturally really emphasize the things we all need to do to take care of our mental health.
Right. It's like talking about just doing the preventative steps as opposed to once you're there, how do you just, go backwards? It's like a thought of someone being on a bed about to kill themselves. And you're like, have you tried ginger? It's not going to work. It's an interesting thing that it's just like, you need to do preventative maintenance for your car. You need to do preventative maintenance for yourself. It seems so logical.
Well, I was going to say that the causation of the lack of awareness really is just based, and I use this word in a respectful way. It's just basic ignorance. Psychiatry in particular is not necessarily a rocket science, and it's definitely not a mathematical science. You can't make mental equations like E = MC squared. It's very philosophical, and it's relatively new. It's not something that I would say has been so great since 1960s, 70s, even, right?
Two phases, right? We really started with the idea of a talking cure, really understanding our inner worlds and our motivations and our unconscious, kind of coming out of psychoanalysis, and then the psychopharmacological revolution. We understand that certain receptors, certain molecules that we give individuals really can profoundly change their experience. I can take someone with the medicine from like suicidally depressed to like hugging, crying, and feeling wonderful. I mean, when you see that happen.
Isn't that Special K?
Well, Special K is interesting is ketamine has now innovated my field, right? That now, I mean, I've not offered psychedelic medicine in my practice, and that's going to change.
One of my best friends who has
that's really awesome
depression,
that you just said that. We'll come back to that. Ralph, finish.
I'll say one of my best friends who has clinical depression, his life has changed with ketamine therapy. It's 180 to who he is.
So I think what's interesting for us, and that's wonderful to hear about your friend, and that happens. One of the challenges with ketamine is getting that response to stick, but these are called rapid acting antidepressants. We're also now entering an era where psychedelic medicine, the two most recent exciting trials in mental health were about psilocybin, and probably if we're going to put the third in there, was about MDMA ecstasy. And so it's a very heady and exciting time. And so just to answer your question of like, why didn't we think about this? That's not nearly as cool as talking about the Mediterranean diet or thinking about how your microbiome, the bugs in your gut are influenced by the fermented foods and fiber you eat, and how by tweaking that and doing a better job of eating fermented foods, you actually can decrease inflammation in your brain. You can improve your mental health, most likely. And that we don't have a lot of math equations, but what we do have in mental health is we have more research. And I think the third reason I'm going to say that we didn't talk about this, even though it is common sense, and I agree there's some ignorance, right? You are what you eat. Well, that also matters up here, but we didn't have as much science. We didn't have research. And so now when I started this, I was like a basket of nerves when I go to meetings. I'd be like, let's talk about food and nutrition. They're like, what's the research? It's like, oh, there's a couple of correlational studies. That's really changed. There are now 4 or 5 randomized controlled clinical good trials showing that simple interventions with food make a big difference with mental health, whether that's in the elderly. One trial just gave the elderly individuals with food insecurity and depression some attention around food advice, food security, just some encouragement. They dropped those elderly individuals' depression scores by almost half and that lasted for 2 years. Another trial was in college students, such a horrible time in the sense of that's when depression hits. You're in college. So they took people with depression, college freshmen, who weren't eating very well, and just showed them a little video, did a couple follow-up phone calls, and gave them a box of olive oil, nut butter, nuts, and cinnamon and turmeric, and a lot of encouragement around Mediterranean diet recipes. Those individuals, they on formal rating scales for the reduction in depression, anxiety, and stress by over 30%, both at 3 months and at 6 months. So there's just this data starts coming out where what has been kind of in the wellness world, right? Kind of sound kind of nutty, right? Let's eat better. And it kind of also often takes a kind of anti-med, like, ooh, you don't need that. You need, more wild salmon. And I think it's really allowed us in nutritional psychiatry to be very responsible with this data and say, well, let's start doing this well.
I want to ask a question because it might be a confusing question. I hope I'm explaining myself well enough. It's just a thought in my head is that, like, if I'm eating shitty, right? So it seems to think I'm going to be a little overweight. I'm going to feel sluggish. I'm not going to feel great. That's just stands to reason, right? That's an understandable statement. So when you start eating better, and your mood is elevated, like you're saying, you're getting rid of depression, whatever. Is it because it's actually affecting your brain and making you feel better, or is it because you're losing weight, your systems are functioning better, and so you feel physically better, leading to you feeling mentally better? Do you see the difference? One is like a direct cause to mental, and one is a loop around going from eating better to physically feeling better, which leads to mentally feeling better. There's a big difference in my head.
One's a psychology. I get naked in the mirror and I like what I see. I go.
Right. That's what I mean. Or just sleeping better because you're not.
You look great. You lost weight. Look great. And the other is, are there chemical signals that are telling my brain you should perk up?
Right. That's what I mean. That, so, but it's like you think if people that are going to bed that have acid reflux or that have to wear the breathing things or they're overweight.
Sleep apnea, right?
Sleep apnea, all that stuff. If you're getting rid of that because you're eating better, and it's going to make you feel better, but that you
have to, in your mind, you have to stop compartmentalizing the body and the mind. They're the same thing.
I understand that. I'm just
the brain
curious.
is listen. I don't know that you understand it because you have to really let that integrate into your head that your chemistry is your consciousness. the mind is obviously a center for a lot of neural pathways, but the actual chemistry itself is a huge part of what your consciousness is. And you can do easy tests. For example, go drink 17 cups of coffee and tell me whether you're relaxed or agitated.
I'll be right back.
You can see, you can see.
After I get off the bat.
You can see very clearly how you can make extreme changes to your chemistry. And one could say that the chemistry of the modern man is not happening overnight and now they're depressed. It's a systematic destruction, from going from mother's milk, if you're lucky, to the wrong foods and processed foods and foods that have huge altering effects to one's mood, coupled with trauma and dysfunction in the childhood. When you combine all those things and don't compartmentalize, you can see why people are struggling. And obviously fixing the diet is one compartment of total happiness, but it's absolutely a profound one.
Clear.
I think that's spot on. I mean, I think separating it is something we've always done. So I would say there's always this interrelationship. In psychiatry, we talk about a biopsychosocial model. Like, you can talk to me about biology, but unless I hear about someone's personal psychology and their social environment, that's just one piece of the puzzle for me. And so first, let's just kind of take where you were, right? You've gained some weight, like a lot of men. So the average man gains a pound per year after college. So when you're hitting your late 40s like me, you should be 25 to 30 pounds overweight. That's mainly going to be here, right? Visceral Adiposity. We all know those guys, like, they still got the guns, they still got the chest, right? They still even got some nice thin legs. They might bike, they run, but they got this man tire. So that's visceral adiposity. It's the most dangerous fat in your body because it's
Adipal. Are you saying edible fat? Is it called edible?
Adipal? No, it's adipose. It's
adipose. Okay.
Adipose.
I just wanted to make sure. Is that the fat that wraps around the organs?
Yeah. So it's inside around the intestines, right? It's different than the fat we all have a little bit of fat right under our skin, keeps us, alive and insulated. And and one of the reasons that this kind of high sugar diet really drives that is you're always in this fat storage mode, right? Like, your brain, some part of it's still just a bear, like, berries are good. I need to store some fat for the winter. And so and that tissue is increasing inflammation, right? That tissue is actually kind of signaling and letting out inflammatory factors that those do trigger inflammation in the brain. And so what's happening is people are eating a diet that is pro-inflammatory, lots of things in our diet that make it more, kind of set off more signals in our alarm system. The major regulator of inflammation is also in the gut. So not eating plants, not eating fermented foods means you have a gut where the immune system is really quite kind of activated. You're probably having a hard time in some ways absorbing some nutrients. And most importantly, the stuff the gut does, which we're really just starting to understand, quite magical, and the benefits to you, right? The gut makes all of the neurotransmitters in your brain. Now, they don't float up there, but
when you say the gut, what specific area of the digestive system? Because I know that term is very loose, right?
We're talking about the bacteria, mostly bacteria, viruses, parasites, all the things in there. Mostly.
So is it the entire digestive system from the mouth to the anus?
From all the way from mouth to anus, you have all types of different bacteria that are living in every little crease and corner of that. People are grossed out by that, but it's just true. Remember when they told us that in medical school? And you just see all the medical students like looking at their hands, and
you're 89% bacteria, 11% human cells.
27. So you're looking at me right here, guys. You're seeing 27,000 mediocre human genes, right? But if you look right here, and you could really look closely, you would see 2 million bacterial genes. So genetically, like DNA wise, there's more bacteria here than there is human, which is, it's a profound idea, especially when you begin to think, are there certain bacterial strands that you can cultivate that are better for your mental health? And it kind of gets back to this, Marcus, you have a very good point, right? Consciousness is chemistry, and there isn't, there's a blood-brain barrier, but there's not really that much separation between at all between our brain and our body. Your brain has the vagus nerve kind of slides down this way and reaches down and is sensing the gut at all times. It's kind of informational superhighway. We all know that, right? The minute you get nervous, where do you feel it? In your gut. You know, if you eat something that's a little off, you know. It's not like a question in your mind, like, you're like,
that'll make a trip from your mouth to your anus really bad if you don't eat something right. That's for sure.
Exactly. So and then of course there is this, as you said, the psychology of when we're living well, we're living healthy. It's actually a part of nutritional psychiatry. It's part of what we teach clinicians and also as patients, that we really try to enter food from a very different angle than the rest of people offering food advice. Okay. That we enter food through a lens of a joyfulness and real personal psychology and preference. I.e., if you want to be a vegan, not eating milk or dairy or anything like that, I think a lot of the world is going to judge you. If that brings you joy, as a physician, my job is to help you do that as effectively as possible to feed your brain. A couple little tricks that I know you need. And besides that, I think you're going to do great because you're.
Well, I have a bag of tricks right here. Hold on a second. For our YouTube video.
There you go.
One of my business is I'm in the probiotic supplement business for about 10 years.
So,
I would say, it's really interesting because I could geek out with you on this stuff for 10 hours. We could make the world's most boring podcast if we just talked about all these different things. But I think
we're halfway there.
No, this is really wait. No, actually, Doctor, fuck Ralph. You're actually great at this. This is a casual show. We talk the way we talk. What I would say, Doctor, is that what I find, I'm a layman, obviously, in all this stuff. I'm connected through my different businesses to a lot of people in the clinical field. On my board of directors of my company is a doctor named Jeffrey Mechanic. He wrote 2 books on molecular nutrition, and he's out of Mount Sinai, and he's absolutely brilliant with technical details. And I think why we get along so much is because I show him that some of the abstract things that I talk about, they're actually very technical. So the thing that I would say about your science is that although it seems to be bleeding edge and wow, no one's talking about it, it's really not like that. There's a lot of ancient wisdom that's out there when you think about the truly yoga diet, which is not specific. I'm not talking about it saying eat sweet potato or things that were obviously only available in that land. The thing that is common in great ancient philosophy was the idea to keep a clean house of the body. Mm-hmm. And so,
throughout traditional cultures, you see. This again, you're right. It's not new that food is medicine.
You have a background in that, certainly, because you talk about it. You just talk. You obviously, I'm sure you're opening some of those type of books. You're just trying to filter it through a more.
I think the place that taught me the most about that, Marcus, was just my farm. That you live on it and you grow food. We weren't a large scale farm, but I spent a lot of most mornings sort of barefoot with plants and bugs and creatures and it teaches you both a great respect for food, but also how hard it is to produce, and then just the miracle of it. It's just still, it kind of, I still feel like sometimes I'm a little almost like not in touch with reality when I think about the experience of like, I have this little black speck of a seed and I put it in the ground and I don't do anything. And then I get some of my favorite foods.
It's miraculous.
I just still, it feels like a little magic trick, right? Like, how's that possible?
The fact that you are a very learned scholar and very enlightened and close to the earth, and you're helping people, I would say that what's also not talked about is where your science is likely to actually end up. And that is going to be talking about some things today that would sound awful to a guy like Ralph, is to think about how food also has all different types of, I'm going to use the word very, very loosely, vibrations. And certainly,
it must be real. I just started hearing some ding dong
noise
in the background.
And Doc, you could help me put a better, more mechanical word. I don't have a word. Vibration sounds very 1970s hippie LSD talk, and I'm not that kind of guy. So the foods that you eat certainly you're bringing on their energies, and certainly that itself has to have an effect on your overall energy and chemistry. Do you agree with that? And if so, can you make that sound more scientific for me?
Well, maybe, probably not. I think I would say that the way I say that is we're made of food, and you're talking about really the kind of wild storm of electricity and magnetism that happens, that like it creates the human experience of consciousness. And so, the idea that the potassium in my potatoes and bananas and the sodium from my sea salt and my other veggies and the omega-3 my salmon, like all kind of somehow go in here, get broken down into their most basic components, absorbed intentionally by parts of my body, transported into my brain, put in the right spot, and then, create this.
But they all have consciousness. They're all stemming from consciousness. And certainly to simplify that, you have to, I can't believe that anyone would not think that you have to take on some of the psychology. If you're eating the flesh of an animal, even though it's dead, at the time of its death, it releases something into its chemistry. And certainly when you take it on, like you said, you are what you eat. It doesn't just mean the compounds. There has to be other things that are hard to measure in the scientific community that can affect a person's overall positivity, state of mind, coupled with their childhood and their social circumstances. It's all part of a mosaic.
I mean, good mental health is. I think that's why it's tricky. I mean, I think it goes back to your question, like, why don't we connect food with mental health? And I think that it's mental health for all of us is something that can be a little elusive. It can be a little fun. We can be functioning great and not feel well. We can not feel well for reasons that we're not sure about. We can not feel well for reasons we're really sure about and we can't do anything about. So, and we can also feel great in all kinds of different shades of great. And because of that kind of mosaic and spectrum of human emotional experience, it does create a lot of levers for us to pull to influence our mood and influence how we feel and how we experience others. It also, I think, creates, a lot of challenges. Is there's a lot of messaging coming at people right now around what to do about their mental health and how to have mental health and the importance of mental health. And I think it can, at times get kind of overwhelming.
Yeah, for sure. I could agree. I mean, you also get so many mixed messages, but I have a couple of questions about the book. I have to apologize. I have to cough 1 second. Excuse me. Whoa. So one of the things you have in your book is the top food categories for beating depression and anxiety. I know that fermented food is a big part of that, but can you elaborate a little bit on that? Yeah, for sure. So the book, Good Eat to Beat Depression and Anxiety, is really out of my clinic's work and my work trying to integrate this knowledge, ancient wisdom, we've called it, which is true, common sense, which is true. And I would also argue really based on recent science, evidence-based mental health care. How do you integrate that? How do you still do a great job taking care of depression and hearing someone's narrative and story and symptoms, but also hear about their diet? And so I've tried to emulate some of that process in the book. There's a chapter called Eat or Heal Thyself, which is really me asking people to take a step back from all of the really strange information, misinformation, pressure, patriarchal values that's really kind of gotten overlaid on reasonable nutrition advice. And let's think in broad terms about the food categories that tend to matter. And for most part are missing in the Western diet or the American diet for most folks. Things like seafood, we just don't eat a lot of seafood. We don't eat the right seafood. A lot of folks, myself included, didn't know how to prepare seafood or make seafood or, besides like a fish sandwich. I know you feel that clams are really important. That's one that you're a big advocate. Clams are a great example, right? To most people, like, we don't eat clams. No doctor's ever recommended clams, but to everybody listening, I'd ask you to think that clams are actually the top source of vitamin B12. If you have some clams once a month, you never need to take a B12 supplement because there is so much B12 in 3 ounces of clams. And that's where, things like steamed clams with butter and herbs are in the book. I did not grow up on a coast. I grew up in rural Indiana. There were no clams in my life, but now there are. And actually mussels is what got me into the bivalve. Well, I was going to ask you, do you feel that clam, I know that also you and Marcus diverge a little bit here with food, but do you feel clams are the king of the bivalves in terms of nutrition, or oysters or cockles? Or I think oysters are the top, but I would say that, the way I answer that question, as much as possible to Marcus's questions, we don't have math equations. I tried to make a very simple math equation around food.
a colleague, Laura LaChance, and I looked at all of the scientific literature a few years ago and said, which nutrients have significant evidence that they impact clinical depression, that they can prevent it. If, a population eats more of this nutrient, they have less depression. Or if we give this nutrient in a trial, people's depression improves. And there were 12. We called them the antidepressant nutrients. We created the antidepressant food scale, and oysters are at the top. But what's important is oysters, mussels, and clams are 3 of the top 5. And the reason is this: they're very concentrated in nutrients like B12 for oysters and mussels, omega-3 fats, zinc, protein, and they don't have a lot of calories. What we're after in this type of thinking is we're after brain nutrient density of food. So what I really care about in a food is per calorie. Does it give me a heck of a lot of magnesium, iron, selenium, these 12 nutrients? And that's really, in some ways a limited lens, right? I'm not thinking about things in some ways that are harmful. I'm not like a lot of food scales. We didn't think about, cholesterol or saturated fat or salt or things that oftentimes people think are harmful, because from a data perspective, what we felt mattered is to push out foods that don't have nutrient density, highly processed foods generally, and really replace those with foods that have a lot of nutrient density. So,
well, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think that to first of all, getting scientific, you'd have to look at, first of all, how much B12 does anybody actually think they need to be alive on the planet? And if someone is deficient in that, you'd have to try to get to the root of the problem, because you're not supposed to be deficient in that. And so one would say that, you talked about a little bit about gut health. I know that B12 is synthesized by having the right population of good, symbiotic flora. But I would say that, while clams might be high in certain compounds, they're the garbage can of the ocean. They're basically consuming the fecal material and all the waste material that floats to the bottom of the ocean. And they're very, very hard on one's liver, which is also going to cause a chemistry problem. I think that.
The only reason they'd be hard on the liver would be, are you thinking from a parasite load potentially?
No, because it takes in a lot of effort to clean out the shit that's coming in with those other compounds. And I think when you think about nutrition, you have to say, what's the cleanest source?
Taking the clam out of the food cycle, which I don't do, because, all your kale grows in shit too. And all it does is take the nutrients from the shit and turn it into kale. Every piece of organic kale in America is grown in a big pile of cow manure. That's where it all comes from. And so I agree, there are certainly some new modern concerns about bivalves that revolve around what's in their stomach. But I would say making them the kind of way, I think this is one of the challenges, is people put judgments like that on Mother Nature. And that always gets me a little like, I don't think that's right. Like the mussel's a filter feeder, right? It's hanging off of a rope. They're all farmed. So it kind of puts a challenge there. We like wild seafood. Mm-hmm. But I think one could argue that seafood is the most environmentally friendly protein. It's not a plant-based protein that you can have, just because, again, you can say they filter out all the crap, they eat all the waste. That's true. You could also say that they're a vital part of the food supply. And just like mushrooms, right? A different part of the food supply, something that we can feast on to give our brain nutrients. At least that's how I see it.
Well, I agree. I hate to have that debate. I'm certainly not going to have the vegan debate about anything
Marcus,
philosophical.
I like having the debate.
No, you know what it is? I never went to debate school, so
me either.
Well, evident by the fact that you call it debate school.
Well, here's what I would say is that if it's not available in the plant kingdom, then whatever that nutrient is, the human body doesn't need it. I know that is science.
Disagree.
Okay, and so what I would say is that
available in the plant kingdom.
Right, and so what I would say
nutrient for brain health.
What I would say is that to look at a person's diet and talk about their diet and what they should leave out is a mistake. Instead, what I try to do is talk about the optimal diet for the human body, and let people decide where they want to be. What creates a lot of confusion for people is when they hear someone say something like the keto diet, or now there's a new clam diet because someone said this. What they make is a classic mistake of recognizing that you have to look at the total diet. And so the idea is, if a person who lived 200 or 300 years ago and was highly active and had rich metaphysical worldviews and, really knew their place in their tribe, and they got rest and drinking clean water and fresh air. If their diet came from mostly clams, they still live 100+ years. They did fine because of all those other factors. But when you look at the modern Western diet and people start just adding more and more things without thinking about what they have to take out, no matter what, they're going to intoxicate themselves. And so I wouldn't say that clams are a solution to humanity's problems. They are a food.
I don't think
you can get something from the. Yeah, but I just want to make sure that I'm saying
it's a solution to humanity's problems. I think B12 clams would be a solution to British male vegan B12 deficiency. 73% of male vegans are frankly B12 insufficient.
You said British. You said only for people in Britain.
The study was in Britain, so I just
let me ask you a question. Who has a car outside that's been parking for 45 minutes? I keep hearing a beeping in the background. Is that?
That's I don't know what that is. It's like that's.
It seems like someone's having a very difficult time.
In the study,
a construction site next to me. Let me tell you, if you think it makes the podcast bad, it's like horrible when you're in sessions. Like,
God.
Anyway,
I don't spend much time in England, but from what I see from the show Ted Lasso, they love their alcohol, and my master of food taught me that alcohol was very destructive for the microbiome in the body, and so one coexisting factor in people who were deficient in B12 could have high intake of alcohol. So if you eliminate the alcohol, the problem goes away.
I mean, people are lushes these days. Everybody's drinking way too much alcohol. Everybody's justifying it that like you can drink it for your heart health. It's all garbage. Alcohol's a neurotoxin. It's crappy for your health. It's crappy for your brain health. It's crappy for relationship.
High five. We agree completely.
It's good for getting the ladies' pantaloons.
Yeah, well, I mean, I didn't know you can say that anymore, Rob. I think it's a good social lubricant.
You moron.
I'm just an idiot. I just have to say stupid shit every now and then.
How freaking anxious everyone is. And how hard it is for people to be present with one another in their truth. I mean, I am.
Are you an anxious guy? May I ask? I'll admit I have anxieties, and they happen at 10 o'clock. They go away by 11.
He said that this book came from a very personal experiences. I read that somewhere as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think all people actually, and all men in particular, struggle with some forms of anxiety.
You're projecting.
Yeah, I have anxiety, Marcus. I've for sure. I mean, I don't think you can have, for most people, an ambitious and successful life without anxiety. Actually, I wrote a piece for Men's Health that calls anxiety is my superpower.
I mean, it's a human condition. I mean, it's a pretty freaking anxious world.
In my mind, and I worry about it, and I know. I guess I also I know it has meaning. And so,
what time does your anxiety come?
Well, it really depends. I mean, I'm in the midst of a bunch of transitions, so it's been a little ever present. For me,
the guy that can't park outside your window is giving me anxiety.
That guy gives you that. It's.
Are you a meditator? Are you a meditation type guy?
I am not a regular meditator. I am a regular breath work, mindfulness, nature exercise guy.
Great nutrient for the brain.
The thing I feel is that those, in my mind, can all be looped into the same category, whether it's meditation, breathing exercises, oneness outside with nature, whatever the fuck it is, they're all the same thing. I just think that the term meditation, makes you loop into one category.
Wow, you're paying attention. You're paying attention. Let me ask
you, I want to drop, because I have a couple of quick questions. I don't want to waste much more of his time. I just was reading like little note points about you, and one of them, the line was, I don't know what type of controversy this is, but it said the Kale Controversy. What kind of controversy is there on kale with you? Does that mean anything?
So the controversy with kale is that kale, as it became popular, spurned a kale backlash, which a number of people have really cashed in on or tried to cash in on, spreading misinformation about kale.
Is this the thyroid issue or goitrogens?
There are three issues that have been spread in terms of massive misinformation in kale. I say this as co-founder of National Kale Day and author of 50 Shades of Kale. And
you're biased. Okay, you're biased.
And
Kale biased.
Look, let's just be clear. I'm an instrument of the kale mafia. They came, they know some stuff on me.
The kale kuza, as they call it.
The Kale Controversy. That's a good one.
Let me tell you, it's a strange feeling to be a mid-career psychiatrist and like walk into a room of all your colleagues to deliver a talk on food and mental health and have people like snickering and giggling and calling you Dr. Kale. I mean, that's
great. It's really great.
They're jealous. They're just jealous. They're jealous of your nearly perfect eyebrows.
They it might be they also, psychiatrists like a good joke. So the kale controversy, as I refer to it, is that kale is an example of a nutrient dense food. Just like clams, you shouldn't just eat clams, you shouldn't just eat kale, but as a dietary pattern where we're pushing more nutrient density, fewer calories, less garbage, more good stuff, kale is an example of dark leafy greens, one of the other food categories I emphasize in the book. The misinformation about dark leafy greens and kales has come from a number of sources. Initially, it was to undermine the efforts of National Kale Day. We had helped the LA County school system serve every kid in LA County public school kale. They had an effort to introduce 5 superfoods to all kids in California to improve school food. We thought that was a good idea, feeding kids more vegetables. There's actually a new study out looking at well-being, mental health well-being in kids, and showing that improving dietary quality in cafeterias and schools is a major factor in terms of improving child mental health. So this should be of interest to all of us. We took it really seriously. There was a journalist and a kind of rogue scientist who had determined that when you grow kale in radioactive soil, the kale absorbs the radioactive thallium. Now, this isn't news. Kale, one of the reasons it's so nutrient dense is it absorbs so much from the soil. If you grow stuff in garbage soil, you get garbage food.
Right.
That doesn't seem to be a radically, interesting piece of information, but this really got people excited because haters, as Taylor Swift says, haters love to hate. And so the idea is if you don't like kale, well, then you need to shit all over it, I guess. This then gets usurped by a bunch of people. One of the big kind of influencers in the wellness space says kale's high in oxalates. Again, this is really fascinating. Kale is actually the definition of a low oxalate green. Oxalates aren't dangerous. They're just compounds that hang on to calcium. When plants spend so much time trying to pull nutrients out of the soil, they hang on to them. That's one of the reasons that we cook vegetables. It's one of the reasons that we put vinegar and lemon juice on vegetables, is to try and liberate some of those minerals a little bit more. They're still quite absorbable from plants. But that was the kale controversy. Suddenly kale went from, hey, it's healthy, you should eat it, to kale is, elitist. First of all, the first time I ate kale was in rural Kenya. It's called sukuma wiki. It's traditionally...
Wow, that sounds like something I might say to a girl. Hi-oh, we're bringing it back.
Sukuma wiki. It means push the week, which means when you're running out of...
The fact that you heard that and processed a joke out of that instantly just proves how infantile you
are. Ralph is ready to go out tonight. He's like, alcohol's poison, but the ladies talk more to me, and like, I'm going to use this. I talked to this
I'm just trying to be an idiot. I apologize.
Wait, so I think in my industry, the kale and spinach terror came from some botched research on people who had thyroid problems, and they were having problems with anything that was goitrogenic.
This isn't research on people, Marcus. This is research on sheep. There was one study that if you only feed sheep kale, because there are molecules in kale that compete with iodine for uptake, that you don't uptake any iodine, so you get a big goiter. When you take the sheep off the all kale diet, you know what happens? The goiter goes away. And so again, if people are eating lots and lots and lots of kale all the time and doing what all Americans have done, which is cut out the iodine from their diet, urinary iodine is dropped by something like 50% over the last 30 years in the US, meaning we're not eating a lot of plants with iodine, we're not eating a lot of seafood. So theoretically can cause thyroid problems? Sure. Are there a lot of people in the wellness kind of thyroid expert space who are using that for, I would say, fear-mongering purposes and based on bad science? Yes, 100%. I think that it's one of those things that's really, it's a shame. It's where instead of focusing on simple, healthy foods that Mother Earth gives us, that people can go grow that are accessible to everyone by focusing on kale. What's the difference between kale and broccoli? They're the same exact genus and species. What's the difference? Well, the big difference is my kale plant will drip leaves all summer long. One kale plant, I can feed my entire family. Whereas broccoli, you just cut off the head. Now, broccoli is wonderful, but there's something about the kale plant that's really special. I did grow over 50 varieties of kale. Kale grows all over the world. And it just, I guess it kind of made me, it's why it's here in the top corner of my book, is that no matter what the haters are going to say, kale's my muse degrading.
Let me ask you one last question because I know I happen to love fermented food. I know you're a big fan of ingesting fermented food. Is there one that you would recommend as like one of the best? Is it kimchi? Is it like, what do you think that you like the most?
Nathan's hot dogs raw.
The best fermented food that we recommend, in my opinion, is kefir. It is kefir. A dairy-based liquidy fermented yogurt. Most people, I use it in all of our smoothies. The simple reason is that kefir has more colony-forming units. So I don't find that people eat a lot of fermented foods. There was a recent study out of Stanford saying you can significantly improve the immune status of your body, significantly improve the diversity of your microbiome, all the bugs in your colon, by eating 6 servings of fermented foods a day, which sounds like a lot. But you have a kefir smoothie in the morning, you drink some kombucha, throw some sauerkraut on the salad or with your veggies at night. It's not that hard. And so,
I happen to be one of the ones that love that flavor, that fermenty flavor. I love it. So to me,
I would say about the kefir, it's very similar to the clam, is that to get to the good stuff, you have to go through a mountain of inflammatory causing foods. And also in regard to what you said about the colony forming units, you don't need that many colony forming units if the bacterium is a robust bacterium. Most of the time, they load colony forming units into a probiotic because that particular strain doesn't do well in the first stage of the mouth and in the low pH of the stomach. There are certain strains of bacteria that do very well. And so a very low count is actually more effective. And also the key thing to understand is that generally the probiotics that survive in food, they're so common on this planet that those are not the probiotics that most people are deficient of.
Marcus, yeah. I'm sorry. Yes. I think the most recent study from Stanford calls everything you said into question. And I think based on the most recent science,
I go by Harvard. I'm sorry. I don't like the Stanford boys. They have a terrible rowing team.
It's just, I was really impressed with the study because it changed how I think about probiotics. Because based on this study, the probiotics that grow or change in the gut aren't the probiotics we eat. So the lactobacillus, the bifidobacterias, those aren't the ones that are increasing in population as you eat more fermented foods. That really surprised me. The other
wait, repeat that again, because I'm sorry, I didn't
take the probiotic. Or
I was struck that you pulled the Stanford card on me. I felt it. I felt it heavy, and I was like, wow, I was knocked off balance. But
like that, I'm not trying to pull it like that.
No, it's all right. It's all right.
By the way, it might have been my favorite moment of the whole podcast.
You take the probiotics, right? It's like dropping some Boy Scouts into Manhattan and being like, you guys, you need to go fight the club scene, make it pure, get these people to stop drinking and partying. And the Boy Scouts are down there. There's like, man, there's only like 20 of us. There's like millions of people on this island. How are we going to do that? And I've wondered, how do those good bugs do that? We call them the good bugs. So this study in Stanford followed people for 17 weeks, had them ramp up their eating fermented foods to six servings a week. And they measured microbiome.
6 servings a week or 6 servings a day?
Sorry, 6 servings a day. Thank you, Rob. And measured microbiome, all the metrics, all the measures of diversity, beginning and after. And what they found was not growth in any way in the populations of bacteria that people are eating. It's growth in other bacteria. And they theorize, one, it's that people are, that some bacteria are kind of elbowing out and creating room for these bacteria to grow. The other thought they had, they theorized, was it's allowing the body to absorb other bacteria. But it was really surprising. It wasn't that significant of a change. They moved, they got more similar, but everybody's microbiome was really diverse. And then I don't think most of the probiotics probably make it. It sounds like, they don't make it to the gut. And once they make it to the gut, that's not increasing the population of that bacteria. It doesn't, per the study, doesn't seem to be how they work. I think also the dosage thing, I've just kind of been unimpressed with the probiotic supplement market. I think they tend to be very overpriced. And for most families, when you're looking at what people are pricing probiotics at per colony forming unit compared with what seems to make a difference, yogurt, fermented foods, fermented vegetable brines, kimchi, just for most families on a colony cost per colony forming unit, you just can't compete with fermented.
I know that Stanford does a good job. I'm connected with Harvard, and they have a pretty
but he's talking about this guy Steve Harvard that he met.
No. We're not going into anything too deep like that. I would say this is that probiotics are controlled by companies. They're not controlled by governments, and so they're not distributed freely as they could be, because you could make a probiotic grow infinitely as long as you have a medium and a technique for growing it. And there are certainly probiotics that I know of in my industry that have been tested and have incredible studies behind them, specific strains that do exactly the job that you need, which is to release certain proteins that kill anything that's competing for food and anything that can be pathogenic. So it's not critical that a specific strain, Elbocaricus or, whatever thing that you're talking, whatever the industry it's a supplement industry that makes a lot of confusion in the probiotic market. The idea is that you're naturally being on the planet, you should with a clean diet should have a great microbiome, and rather than supplement or think about what food to eat, we have to concentrate on teaching people what to leave out. That's the ultimate solution.
I think that's very in the science, especially around depression and food. The biggest change in the SMILES trial, the best trial, where 33% of people 32% went to full remission from their depression, adding on a Mediterranean style diet. The big finding there is that people cut out 21 highly processed meals per week, so basically 3 times a day. Instead of grabbing a candy bar, you grab some hummus, right? Instead of grabbing a beer, you grab some kombucha. Those are the changes that make a difference. And
certainly the most destructive thing on the microbiome, and it's necessary in some cases, obviously where intervention is needed, is antibiotic treatments. Some people do not restore good microbiome health, gut health, after prolonged treatments, and it's the cause of so many.
The thing for me is that I'm really like equal opportunity in my wrath for big pharma and big supplement, in the sense that I think a lot of people go after big pharma, and let me tell you, the thing I like about big pharma is at least they're on the hook for their products. People don't go after big supplement or big probiotic where there's, it is an industry, billion dollar industry. And both of these industries often claim to have patient interest in mind at the top of their list. And I think sometimes I'm really not so sure of that, when I see how both of them behave in terms of their.
Both industries pass on academic snobbery, and both industries have a vested interest. One might say that a doctor's vested interest oftentimes is being the person who knows something. And so they stay frozen and stuck. And I can hear the contradictions in how people talk when they decide to pull the science card. And then when they decide to leave out the science card, it's oftentimes it's a game. It's not.
Read Freakonomics. That'll show you how often doctors thought they were doing something when they weren't. It's just like the sense that they always do the right thing and they don't, which is fascinating. But we have to wrap this up, by the way, because we're taking up too much of his time.
It was getting fun.
The name of the book.
Piece of arrogance of medicine, I would agree. And I think it's also one of the challenges of medicine. Yeah. At the end of the day, you look to me to help you in one of the most challenging decisions you have, right? And so I hope you guys didn't think I was a snob pulling.
Not at all. Not at all. Listen, I think.
Maybe when you brought up the Columbia, whatever it was.
No, Doc. Listen, Doc. I'm a little. Oh
my God, he left the room. That's
he left
it.
the room.
You pissed him off.
Another one bites the dust. He's going to get something. Hold on, Ralph.
I'm not a snob. See, I'm going to hold mine up to you. I'm not. This is the Wastic study from Stanford. This is how unsnobby I is. Those are my notes from it. And here's the study because I want you to look at it, Marcus. because I'm not a snob, and I want you to tell me what you think about it. This is a study we were talking about. It's Wastick and Gardner.
Can you read it, Marcus?
The title is Gut Microbiota Targeted Diets Modulate Human Immune Status. And I'm really curious.
That's bleeding edge conversation. You're on the cutting edge. It's true. And I would say to you, I'm a little bit older than you, so I could say some stuff to you.
How old are you?
I'm 52. I'll be 53 in a couple of.
Why'd you take your glasses off when you said that? Do you think it made you look younger?
Because they're reading glasses.
Where am I? I'm going to put my glasses on. I'm 40.
What I was saying is this: is it? You're obviously, to me, a wonderful person to talk to about this stuff, because you're very deep into the knowledge and you have a lot of experience. And I'm certain that you are experimenting on yourself. One of the initial question I asked you is, why do you think the scientific community is so late to the party to talk about the most obvious things? And it's what I have found is that what's limiting to their knowledge is that they will not understand things that they're not doing on themselves. So no matter how much books knowledge that you can, if you have a 195 IQ and a photographic memory, obviously a person can regurgitate ad nauseum information that's out there. The problem is if a person isn't doing it on themselves, they're going to have a limited ability to really integrate that information into something that's truly useful.
I would say we're never going to do that, Marcus, though, because that's not how conventional medicine. Actually, we hate that. And I don't say I'm going to say
you're doing it. What are you talking about?
Well, it becomes anecdotal. That's why.
4 books to say there was anything.
It doesn't matter. It's everything in science is, in my opinion, at first a hypothesis until someone goes out and proves it, and then they go out and disprove it, and then there's a new hypothesis.
Describing the scientific method. We have to wrap this up.
All
We're
right,
taking up too much of his time. It's at Drew Ramsey, MD.
What do you mean? He loves us.
The book is Eat to Beat Depression and Anxiety, Nourish Your Way to Better Mental Health in 6 weeks. He's holding it up for the YouTube viewers. Dr. Drew Ramsey, thank you so much for taking time out on the Good Sugar Podcast. Is there anything else you want to plug before we wrap it up?
Well, I just want to say thank you guys for taking the piss out of snobbery and academic circles. I hope you appreciate why we're lame like that sometimes, but I think we should always be open to critique. And I think we should all be focused on the fact, no matter who's right about the science, everybody's sick. People are really struggling with their health. And we really all need to get on the same side, all of us in our everyday lives, to really.
We're on the same team, is what you're saying.
We're definitely.
Yeah, and I'm going to have a kale and clam salad after this.
I thought it was funny when you asked him, does he have anything else to endorse? And he goes, yes, I want to invite everybody for the 2-for-1 special at Tony's Clam and Casino Bar.
Marcus, I know you don't ever want to.
Something if you're interested in or you like.
I love clams. By the way, all the things you're endorsing are things that I love, so it makes it easier for me. Marcus never wants to plug anything except mentioning his wife.
I want to plug the doctor's work and his book, and I would say to any reader, as I would say, is buyer beware of anything, including anything I say. The one thing that I would remind everyone is, although you can certainly do very well having a clean diet and throwing some clams on there, if you're going to do the clams, don't do them more than maybe 2 or 3 days a month, and make sure you eat a large leafy green salad. I'm promoting green salads and clams, even though I'm vegan.
Prescription. Like I said, we're on the same team. I don't think you should eat clams every day.
There goes what I was eating this whole week. All right, and follow my other podcast, the SDR Show, Sex, Drugs, Rock and Roll Podcast, and follow me everywhere at I Am Ralph Sutton. And we'll see you next week on GSP, the Good Sugar Podcast.